Just when you thought I couldn't make enough server videos, here we are with another. We're back with this, which if you remember, is the machine that tried to fight me profusely when I went to install 2 new 500 gigabyte hard drives. We're gonna do 2 things today. I don't know why that was so difficult to say. I am going to solve my issue that was created because this machine fought me. And I'm going to install a couple of 5 1/4 inch drive bay cages here. These I rescued from a machine that was headed to the scrap heap. And I figured that they would make a pretty good replacement for that. Or a really good installation to make that better so that they're not just floating in the bottom of the machine. But the problem, of course, I don't know that they'll actually fit in this machine because I think the case is too shallow in order for them to work. But I'm going to try, and the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the motherboard because this thing is running an old Haswell-based motherboard that is effectively maxed out, and I think I can do better than that. So what I have in this box right here is a actually relatively new motherboard. This is a Q470M. This is actually the motherboard out of my old desk PC at work, and quite honestly, a 4th gen i7 is good enough for the task. It's just that I can do better. So the 4th gen i7 is good enough. I think a 10th gen i5 that's got a 10500 on it should also be good enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this off. We're going to shut this down. This is a planned hardware installation. I keep saying all the time, I think I'm the only person that ever fills this out. By the way, people keep saying, oh, you're running Windows 10 on your server. Why are you running Windows 10 on your server? This is Windows Server. In fact, I can prove that to you very easily. We'll come in here before I turn it off. Oops, that's remote desktop. Look at that, Windows Server 2022. This is not Windows 10, despite the fact that it looks like it. So we'll shut this off. The only physical server I'm running Windows 10 on is that one, and it really doesn't even need to run that. I could put Windows Server on that if I really wanted to. I just don't feel like messing with it. That's planned hardware install. We'll shut it off. It'll probably decide it wants to install updates. I'm kind of shocked it didn't. There it goes. So, just to make sure it doesn't decide to turn back on, we'll hit the switch, and let's pull this thing out of here. Okay, perhaps I should have seen this coming. I guess I kind of did, but this ain't gonna work. Does it fit? Yes. Can I plug the power into that? I don't think that's going to work. If that were a right angle connection, maybe I could get away with it, but it's not a right angle connection, and I don't have an adapter to go to a right angle connection. So we're just going to skip that entirely, because the other problem, which you will not be able to see because there's no light on this camcorder, is that it is pressing right up against the giant Medusa that is coming out of the power supply. So in order to make something like this work, what I would need is a shallow case power supply, or what's called a shallow case power supply. The irony, I have one in this, that I believe, yeah, that's the ATX standard. I do not trust this thing as far as I could, well, I don't trust this thing at all, because this one that's in this machine has blown up once in the past with smoky capacitor smoke. It still worked the last time I tried it. I don't know if it's going to work now. I haven't tried to power on the machine since. So don't trust that. And I might be mildly surprised to learn that you can actually buy them if you go on eBay and get them out of China, but I don't know that they actually sell them in modern 80+ variants. So that really is just a giant non-starter. Watch what happens when I take this out. If I can. There might be too much pressure on it. Yeah, it might be, yeah. You see that? It just moved. Because there's way too much pressure on that. So I'm going to take it out. It also doesn't really fit in this case. You might be able to see that it's left some streaks because I guess the manufacturing tolerances just aren't that good. I'm going to blame that on the case more than anything else, but the fact of the matter is that isn't going to work. So I'm going to put the front cover back on. I'm going to shove the huge Medusa back there. And we're going to forget that that was ever even a thought. But I am going to go forward with replacing the motherboard. So what I want to do... I also do have some concerns about the fans in these, but we'll pretend that I didn't see that. I'm going to power it on, which it will automatically do. And I want to check power usage. Looks like 80, 72, 73... Overclocking failed. Please enter setup to reconfigure your system. Well, that's an interesting error message. I don't know why that would have happened. Probably, actually, honestly, probably because I did flip the power, because I was curious if this was pinching any wires while it was in there. So I flipped the power on and then almost immediately flipped it back off. That's probably why it's upset. But anyway, doesn't matter. All the drives are still there, so it didn't break anything or anything like that. But I'm going to pull this completely out. I'm going to pull all this stuff out, and I'm going to change this motherboard. Okay, I've emptied out the case of pretty much everything that would get in my way, other than the fan. The rear fan is still there, but... And so is this cable management crap, but that's not going to last very long. In fact, this one is already loose. So this junk is pointless, so I'm going to pull it out, get rid of it, get these wiring out of the way, and put the new motherboard in. The new motherboard is larger, will extend to these screw holes here. I have screws for them. There are 8 screws there. But I'm hoping that I don't have to pull this fan. I might have to pull the fan in order to get the new motherboard in place, because I might not have enough leverage. In fact, I am going to pull the fan. So, pull the fan, pull this dumb cable management crap that no one needs, and then we'll put the new board in. Okay, what is this case anyway? It's got 2 connections on the front. Alright. So, I have the I/O plate in. I've pulled out all the dumb stuff. It's sitting right there. And I pulled out the rear fan. Some of you might know that these cases generally come with a plastic carrier for the rear fan. In fact, I think this one still has it. You can see it there. Which normally would be quite convenient, but the problem is you can't get these out without employing violence. Which, as you can see, was quite clearly employed on this case in order to get that out. So that's why it's no longer in there with a plastic brackets. So let's see if I can get this motherboard in here with all this giant tangly mess moved out of my way. Okay, it is in place as you see here now. Some of these screws are cross-threaded and not in right, particularly these ones, but I have long learned that this particular machine is going to fight me tooth and nail every step of the way, and I'm not really interested in that. I just need this thing to work. So, work it's going to do. I'm not keeping this case anyway. What's probably going to happen with this, I still have that Antec case. I don't remember the exact model. I want to say NSK 2400, but that home theater style case. And even though I really don't think that it's useful for a server environment, particularly one where it's not going to be sitting horizontally like it's designed, yeah, I might just say forget it and use it anyway, because it will do away with this nonsense drive cage that is absolutely terrible, and it will also have much more room, it'll have better fans, and it will just be a better experience all the way around, and this thing can probably just end up getting resigned to the dustbin of the scrap yard where it belongs. So, in the interim, I'm going to go ahead and plug in all this crap that's right here. I'm going to put the power supply back, and I'm going to get this thing hooked back up. We'll check the power usage like we did before. I'm going to set this motherboard up the way that it needs to be set up, and then I'm going to put this thing back in the rack, and we'll do the remainder of whatever work it is that we need to do. And that is how this is going to go. We'll see if that actually is the process, and if it doesn't fight me more steps along the way. I hope it doesn't, because I'm really not in the mood for that, but, you know, with this crap, you just never know. Okay, so we are back the way that we were. Now, my only question is, are those connections plugged in correctly on that SATA block? Because although they're labeled as far as what they are not labeled as far as which port is which. So in a row of 1 and 2, it's labeled SATA 6G_12, but which port's 1, which one's 2? I have absolutely no idea. So we're going to find out together. At the same time, we figure out how much power this thing now uses. I don't think it'll be too different, because really the high power usage stuff is still in here, the 3 hard drives. And I don't have SSDs to replace them with right now. But let's see. 30, 44, 61, 75, 81, 83, 63. There's our beep, 55, 62, 56, 55. So, looks like about roughly a 25 watt drop on that. Here we can see 32 gigs of RAM. I do probably need to update the BIOS at some point. That some point is not right now. That is a future problem. Because I don't even know where my USB stick that I was using to do that happens to have gone. I would like to see if I can get that 480 gig SSD out of there. Maybe use that to replace one of these hard drives. Because I have this. It's a 240. I know I've got a couple other 240s sitting around. I thought I had a smaller one. I thought I had like a 60 or like a 64 sitting around here somewhere, but I don't know where it went. So I guess it's largely unimportant. But I'm going to make sure this is set up correctly to boot what it needs to boot. And then I will be back. Thanks to the magic of video editing, you won't have to wait. Isn't it nice? Okay, power on time. Moment of truth, does it still work? I'm not sure why those stupid Intel coolers do that. Does it like this KVM? That's the other question. Well, not really. System has posted in safe mode. Why? Don't really care. So we're going to reboot. I hope that's not the first sign of a problem. Start, damn it. Okay, you have a UEFI logo. It's installing stuff, getting devices ready. Getting ready, probably to launch to Saturn. And I think it just rebooted. Yep. Alright, cool. I really don't understand why it's halfway off the screen. Because that makes a whole lot of sense. Okay, let's fix that. I'll log in here. Okay, logging in. Looks like we're good on that. We have our processor with all 12 threads. Still have 32 gigabytes of RAM. Running at 2666. I wonder if this stuff here actually can handle that. Or if I'm technically overclocking it, because I thought this was 2400. It is 2400. So technically I am kind of overclocking some of the RAM. Hopefully it's stable. But, yeah. Like I said, hopefully it's stable. But I'm going to go ahead and start all this junk up because it looks like it's fine. And we'll wrap up the video. No, we're not going to do any of that, I guess. Because I forgot something. Something important. Yeah. Something very important. And that is changing the network. Whoops. Making sure that the network is set correctly because the interface changed. I think it was an i217 before. Yeah, it was an i217, it's now an i219. Doing this won't change anything else, I just need to make sure that they are all set. And here we go. Now we can try and start them all. And that should be it for that. So stay tuned. There will be a future where this thing gets a new case so I can properly install all of the hard drives that are supposed to be in it. But until then, I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you have any comments, feel free to leave them below.